Okay, so this slideshow is a mix of things that are in the exhibition and also things that are not in my collection. And it's quite long, but I try to shorten it a bit. And I love this. Of course, for those of you, if there's any of you who don't know what Blooks are, it's things, I use that word to describe any object, handmade or manufactured, that's made to look, to imitate a book. And this is a long history of objects that goes back to probably even the 11th or 12th century with the kumdak, which are these very early book boxes. So I often love to use this introductory slide. It's a billboard that was made in the 1920s by the United States Tire Company, and I've been tracking them. I try to look for pictures of them all the time, and I had a feeling after I found one and two that maybe it was an edition, and they were all over the country, and I'm up to about 8 or 9 of them. So I think this was a nationwide open book history book billboard campaign with history of all these towns. I found them in Florida, California, every part of the country. I would love to find a real one. The themes that the slideshow is broken into are almost like the themes of my exhibition. My exhibition and the book has 14 themes and starts with religion. So I just have a few examples of each theme. This is something called a wax book. They're wax books that were made in Bavaria that were made from extruded beeswax string. And they were actually made in in a factory. They look very much like cottage industry type items, but they weren't. They were very popular. They often have things embedded into them. For instance, chromolithographs. This one has a print on the front cover. I have another one that in the back has sort of half of a glass sphere that has a little figure of baby Jesus in three-dimensional in wax under the globe. And I just found another one the other day that actually opens like a book. Most of them are closed and you can't open them. These were sold in church gift shops and kiosks in Bavaria. There are a couple books on the subject, but they're all in German. There are many, many books made out of stone. Often stone books are souvenir items made from the stone of the local area, something that, in this case, it's a Bible. You also see stone books that are love tokens, that are memorial books, and certainly prayer books. This one is it's a soapstone. And the person who made it in the way that the grain of the soapstone, the striations of the soapstone, really look like pages on the edges. They cut it with the grain going vertical. Soapstone's a soft stone, as most of you probably know. This is a memorial book titled "In Memory in God We Trust." And of course, these stone books are solid; they don't open. I've seen stone books both open and closed. If you have any questions as I go along, you're perfectly welcome to ask them, or if you have any thoughts. Yeah. They're hard. Now, I don't know. I mean, the wax books that I have, they're all from either the 1890s to 1910, around that period. So they're old. So maybe the wax became hardened, but it's a beeswax. So I don't know if they treated it. They possibly treated it, or maybe it was the process of extruding it itself that made it hard. But these things are not. They're not soft. But you've seen beeswax. No. The little decorations, the flowers, they're also beeswax, and they were pressed into, should I go back? They were pressed in little molds, almost like candy molds or butter molds. So all those all those flowers are three-dimensional, and they're quite delicate. And in all the wax books I've seen, some of them have been broken or popped off. They're brittle. It's a little brittle. Have you ever seen the wax candles that are made like strings like this, and they actually have thread in them? The little book I just got, the one that opens, it's a little tiny wax book, actually does have the thread in it. Just like a candle would. I don't know if this has thread in it anyway. Maybe the thread gave it structure. But at the joint where the cover opens, you can see the thread, like they melted the wax away. So that's possibly strengthening it. But I have about 4 of these, and I've seen other ones, and they lasted 100 years. So they're pretty tough. but still they're wax. This is something called the Book of Books. I know the title because I found the patent for it. And in the patent, this object has a slipcase. The slipcase is a book-shaped slipcase, and it's titled the Book of Books. And what it is the title of the patent was Educational Appliance. And it's a bookshelf full of little wooden books, book blocks. Each of them is a book of the Bible, and this one I think was probably used in a Sunday school to teach children to memorize the books of the Bible. But in the show, if you go, you'll also see that I have another one that's a homemade one that obviously someone's mom or dad made out of recycled wooden boxes, little cheese boxes, thin wooden strips. And so a lot of people, this was a very common book, and still today, like I looked online recently, and I saw that someone was making someone had a home business where they were actually printing book covers that looked like books with the books of the Bible for your cereal boxes. So you can turn all your cereal boxes into one of these. So it's still a current practice. It also accentuates the importance of researching primary resources, for instance, patents, advertisements, trade catalogs. And there's a section of my show about this because when you're writing about a subject that there's nothing published about, my book, which is you'll see it's on the table, is the very first book published on this subject. There are bits and pieces in lots of books about book-shaped objects, especially collecting books. Like if you bought a book about a certain, pressed depression glass, you might see a depression glass book. Or, ladies' cigarette cases, you might find one there. But it would be hard to find them if you were looking for them. So the patents, all of you maybe have used Google U.S. patents, Google patents. It's very easy to find American patents. Other countries are harder. But they're great. You can never, when you're looking at things like this, think you know what you're looking at, because sometimes things turn out to be something other than what you think they are. So you have to have an open mind, and patents are really helpful for that. So are these other resources. Memorials and Commemoration. This is a great example of a book relic. It's a hunk of a tree, a famous tree from Massachusetts from Cambridge called the Washington elm, which is supposedly, and I don't think it's true, but said to be a tree that George Washington stood under when he created the Revolutionary Army, I guess. And so when this tree fell down, I think it was hit by lightning, or it fell down in I think around 1921, they cut it up and they sent pieces of it to all the Masonic organizations and to all the states. And people made different things about them. I think there's someone in the audience that might have a hunk of the Washington elm in their collection. And different people made different things out of it. And a book, or the Bible, or a memorial book was one of the things that people made out of them. So this is a unique object. It's in the collection of the Houghton Library. And it's book-sized. It's small. But it's a very beautiful carving on this one. It says it's under this tree, Washington first, you can read that right, first took command of the American Army, July 3rd, 1773. And this is the book that made me start my collection. It's a Cole book. It's a little memorial book from Pennsylvania with the birth and death date of J.F. Fagan, and it's a little prayer book. And I was able to attribute it to this miner, James F. Fagan, who was crushed in a mine, and that's how he died. And it's a very powerful little object, and it made me really aware of the power of the book as an object, and that's what kind of made me intentionally create a collection, as opposed to, which I had done before, which is kind of accidentally create one. This is a very strange thing. In the section of sort of the genre of funerals and funerary objects, there's many books. You'll see graves, especially gravestones and grave markers and cremation urns. But this is really I love this one. And obviously it was probably made by a bookbinder, because it has sort of bookbinding materials. Like it's one of those cushion padded bindings, like so typical of religious books. But the title just kills me, Lingering Memories, which is, I can't even imagine that you would use that title for, so it was meant to, for the mourners to kind of collect mementos. of the funeral. And this is something that I originally thought was a butter mold, but then I learned later that it's a maple sugar mold from North America, from like Maine or possibly Canada, and it's a Bible maple sugar mold. And I've started to see emerge as a theme. For instance, I've seen another maple sugar mold like this that on the spine, instead of the raised bands, has the letters RIP. So that's what made me think, well, they needed maple sugar Bibles for funerals for the kids. I always wonder, like, why do we need to have sugar Bibles? But then even the other day, like, no kidding, at my show, one of the people who came to my show brought me a gift of a book-shaped box for maple sugar that was made more in the 30s, and I'd seen it before. It was called The Sweetest Story Ever Told, but fortunately it came with the original brochure, which said, next to the Bible, this is the best book you're ever going to see. And it was like, they're still doing it. Like, you know, so it is, a lot of times it takes years for these things to emerge as themes. For a while you don't know what they are. Then you kind of figure out what they are, but you don't know if it's the only one. And then you start seeing these trends, and it's very, very interesting. Because really, this is sort of a parallel history to book history. So trend chart, I only put a couple slides in. But what trend chart is a term that refers to objects made from the refuse of the battlefield. And you see a lot of these things made in a lot of wars, but definitely in World War I. And this particular object it's a little gasoline-powered lighter, and it's referred to as a bullet lighter. And it's brass and copper, and it's made out of the soldiers, and also just people in the area would collect the spent artillery shells, bullet shells, and they would turn them into these book lighters. It was a very common practice. There are many of them. If you looked on eBay, you could see them any day. Called trench lighters. And each one is different depending on the talent of the person who made it. You might have a very, very simple book, or you might have a beautifully engraved, personalized, work of art, a really gorgeous one. And they're different sizes too. I have 3 of them in my exhibition. And this is a box from Rennes, and Rennes was a very important place in World War II. There was a German prisoner of war hospital. It was a very busy and sad place, and here's someone made this sort of really a memorial or commemorative box. Friendship and love. Well, this is something a lot of you may be familiar with, because it's from the Metropolitan Museum of Art's collection, and years ago the Met made a reproduction of this, and there's thousands of them out there. And the reproduction's pretty good, because it's as reproductions go. It's a very nice object to have, and the Met has quite a few, maybe 3 or 4 ceramic hand warmers. Sometimes people have told me also that these were made to warm up beds, but maybe they were larger, like a hot water bottle. Basically, that's what it is. And this is a little box that is sort of imitating an album amacorum. Album amacorums were the German autograph books of the early 19th century. And in this case, people also made them, not actually books, but book boxes, and then all of the paper, and it was full of different little pieces of separate paper, colored papers, and your friends, that has etchings. It's like a little portfolio. You would collect little bits of plants or poetry from your friends or drawings, and this one is imitating sort of a cameo binding, which is a very well-known Italian binding style because of the sort of relief design on both covers. And souvenirs. Many book-shaped souvenirs were made. This one is from an English seaside resort, and it has a little picture on the front of a young lady waving goodbye to her soldier boyfriend on his little dinghy, and it's called a present. And if you flipped it over, there's a 3-dimensional pincushion that says "Forget Me Not," and it's a little box for notions or sewing materials. It's a sort of handheld kind of size, and I like that one. There are a lot of these. There's a lot of British shell art in general, but the books were popular. So it's a little bit of a catch-all section. This is a print that a friend of mine sent. It's a print he owns. He's another member of the Grolier Club, and it depicts the universal microscope, which is from the 1613, which is something that people aren't quite sure it was ever made or not. This print is the only known representation of it, and it's a really great. It's just, but what it is an example of a book-shaped box used for scientific instruments, or the book form used for scientific instruments is something you see a lot in the 16th century and around this little later, like this period. Like I've seen book-shaped, like I've seen a clock, the Louvre, I saw a beautiful gold clock from 1500. You see early sundials in book form, and lots of scientific and medical related instruments. This is something called a xylothek. And the xylothek means it's a library of trees. And it's something that you would see in a Wunderkammer or in a very wealthy person's, a royal collection. I've seen one in Prague, they're in Germany. And it's basically in this age of exploration, people would collect tree part, the wood of trees, the bark, the seeds, the stems, and instead of just collecting them in a box or some other display, they would make wood books where each book was completely made from that tree. And then they would finish it like a binding, and these have gold-tooled leather labels, and it's a library of itself, which is a great idea. And you see that a lot in book-shaped objects. You can see, I've seen libraries of stone, different types of stone, one volume, and I've seen these book boxes used for collections of conifer twigs and all kinds of natural history objects. But the xylothek was a popular one. And this is a crazy object that a friend of mine sent me, and it is called Long Life by Exide, and it is the very first aid kit made for the automobile. It was made in 1938, and it's made to emulate an octavo leather octavo binding, and it has a Dickens quote. So instead of just having some sad-looking medical box in your beautiful car, you could have your Dickens novel in your back seat, which converts itself into a first aid kit when you're ready for it. And I found the press release for this object, and there were 600 salesmen selling these all over Europe. They wanted one in every car in the country, and it was, but I've never seen another one besides this one, and mine's quite water damaged, but still has all its stuff in it, all of its supplies. In the photography area, one of the early photography is a really popular area for book-shaped objects. This is called a perspective mirror. There's also other names for this, but before, it's like a viewfinder for prints. It's a three-dimensional viewfinder. So it is like a large quarto. It's wood, but it has the impression of being a large calfskin binding. And it has a hole in the front cover where you can look through it, and you set the prints up inside. And so when you look through the window, the print appears to be three-dimensional. So it's like an early slide projector before there was photography. So I'm not sure why I put it in the photography section. It's a precursor. And then in the 1890s, you see a lot of book-shaped detective cameras. You see them in many countries, in America, France, Italy, England. It was an international sensation. Of course, these were for glass plate negatives, and you could walk around and just take pictures of people unnoticed. But they also made all kinds of detective cameras. They had tie clips that were detective cameras. But I've seen two kinds of book, and I put both of them in here: the single volume and the multi-volume. And if you wanted to see these or learn more about them, Eastman House in Rochester has them in their collection on their website. Sadly, I don't have one. And then the stereoscopic cards, companies that made stereoscope sets really loved the book form for their packaging. And there were three main companies, and they all used the box. And so that when you had, to store their cards, so when you would have their card sets, of course you'd buy them by sets, it would look like you had an encyclopedia of the world on your shelf. And they were quite striking, and definitely made out of gold stamped leather. They really look like they really look like books. I mean, if they're on the shelf, you wouldn't. They're not so fake, but they are fake. And then there are a lot of daguerreotype cases and photograph cases in general that were made to look like books, and some of them were made to look like very particular titles and particular books. Specifically, like this one, they were made these were made in the 50s, but slightly earlier than that. The gift book annuals were every year publishers would come out with highly decorated Christmas books, New Year's books that were gifts, and they had these. They were gorgeous. Everyone had them. They would show the middle class bought them. They put them on their tables in their living room for everyone to enjoy. It was sort of like the television of its time, and so the photographers, the case makers realized that if they could emulate the gift books, they would sort of have a sure seller, and so they did. Like this one's called Friendship's Offering. That is the name of a specific gift book. Am I going, how's this pace of this? Too slow, too fast? Is it okay?
Just right.
All right, because it's probably a long way to go. I'll probably try to speed up. So then, this sort of, this I learned about also from the Eastman House. This is the Secret Sam Spy Dictionary, and it's a toy, but it's a spy camera, and it is a camera. So it has a camera, it shoots bullets, plastic bullets out of the index tabs on the foredge, and it has a periscope, which I think is really fabulous about it. And I was able to find one in this is in the show. If you go see it, you can see it there. Lucky to find one in a box, which is hard. For a lot of these objects were very well used. And I put a section in, which of course is not in my show, of artistic and monumental book objects, because it's a category that there are many, many book objects that are large scale, that no one's put together. This is a fountain. I think it's in Budapest. And so there are a lot of public fountains all over the world that are open books and closed books and stacks of books, and people have been sending them to me. A lot have been trying to put them on Facebook. This is one of my favorite themes. I have a blog post I'm working on about the storybook theme parks. There were many storybook theme parks for young children. They didn't have rides, and they were just like fiberglass sculptures that the kids could play in, and there are quite a few of them throughout the country. I had one in Baltimore where I grew up, called the Enchanted Forest, and you could walk. This is sort of like an example of a book as a portal. You walk into it. They should have something like this for your fashion show downstairs, where you can walk through the portal and then you're in the whole fairy tale world. And these are from two different parks. I'm not sure that one's from Washington State with Humpty Dumpty, and the other one might be from Ligonier, Pennsylvania, which is still there. Some of them are still there. I started looking at grave markers or gravestones. There's so many of them, and this is one that belonged to the founder of Jehovah's Witness, just to show you how the book is used in context of gravestones. And I love, of course, the work of Anselm Kiefer, who is as you know, he's a very well-known sculptor who makes a lot of book sculptures. Here are two quite different ones, and he makes this statement. I don't know, can you all read it? Okay. And this, one of the, it's very important to be in touch with young people. As someone who doesn't have children, it doesn't happen that often. I think I miss out on a lot of good stuff because there are things that I'm just not aware of that are book-shaped. And one of the tech guy at the Grolier Club told me about this one and sent me this picture, that there are these giant dance and music festivals that use the book form as the stage set. And here's one, a really giant one. You can see that where the projection of the book is changing all the time. Can you see? Those are the people in the foreground, like 185,000 people. So it's a really giant stage set with a library in the background, closed books, and then the open book with a kinetic image on the front. And I did interview, there's this really wonderful guy who worked at the Met with me, Joe Pecknick, who before he retired, I interviewed him because he knew everything about musical instruments, about did he know any book-shaped musical instruments. And he told me about several of them. One is, on the top is called a Bible regal. There's also something related called a book harmonium. And this was an early form of the bellows instrument, like a concertina, that was a book. And it was also a traveling organ for ministers. So they could move around the country and have services in people's homes or little spaces. And it was they're big books that open up and they pump, the covers pump. With like a pump for an organ. He has a keyboard. And on the bottom is something called a clarinet. And this particular clarinet is in this Museum of Music in Paris. And a clarinet is a crank organ that was used to teach birds to songbirds. And the title of this one is The Art of Teaching Canaries to Sing. And it's a leather binding with marble sides. And this is a shaker pitch pipe. The shakers do not have musical instruments. They sing, and they have a pitch pipe that's a Bible. And these are not that uncommon either. There's quite a few of them. This is one that's in the Met's collection as well, but I don't know if it's ever been on view. I think probably not. I know the Bible regals have never been on view because I think they're damaged and they'd have to undergo a lot of conservation. There's so many book-shaped radios. I would say I've tracked book radios back to around 1920. The earliest, one of the ones I've seen, which I haven't ever actually physically seen yet, but I read about it in a book, was called The Talking Book, and it was in actually a commercial cloth binding. And it was this one single book. It really looked like a book. I love this Bakelite RCA Victor bookshelf radio, which I've seen in quite a few color variants. But this is just I've seen it in white, which is really nice too. With the books are white. And all the major radio companies made book radios. I mean, here's another one, the Crossley, one of my favorite. I have one of these in the show in the original box that it came in. That's where it's really called, the Crossley Book Radio. And it came in, I think, seven binding variants, all gold stamped leather bindings, real bindings, indistinguishable from a real book on the shelf. And they also came with gold transfer paper so that you could inscribe it or put the initials or monogram of the person who you were going to give it to. It was a Christmas gift. It was advertised as a Christmas gift in the mid-1950s. Drinking and smoking. In my show, I call that section stimulating substances because I found other things like snuff boxes and beetle boxes, and they all kind of had to fall into a category of generally bad habits. So that's what I wound up calling it. And another young person told me the other day that there's something called like a one-shot or something for dispensing marijuana that is in book form. And it's like she still hasn't sent me a picture of it. I haven't seen that yet, but I was like, well, that would go in this category too if I could find it. But you've seen a lot of these, I forget what they're called, it begins with a T. Well, basically they're book bars. Often they're French. This one, if it's Dunhill, is British. They were made for a very long time. Sometimes they are made from scratch to look like books, and other times, especially the French ones, were made out of recycled books. They were altered books. And sometimes they just have glasses, sometimes the bottles and glasses, and they're beautiful. And of course, they're made for gentlemen, for their den, and or their drink after dinner. And they're really lovely. Bennington, if any of you have ever heard of the Bennington ceramics from Bennington, Vermont, this is what they look like. They use this particular kind of flint or Rockingham glazes, and in the 19th century, they made quite a few books, closed books in different sizes, quite a few, maybe at least 3 different sizes. And many of them had titles, and they always had funny or pun titles, like we have one at work that's called the Hoodoo Bible. Other ones were called Departed Spirits. So it was sort of just pun titles on, it's for your hidden flask. Although it doesn't really look like a book, but maybe if it was on a bookshelf with other books, it would. Here's an ad I found. I always look for advertisements, so I can sort of see the context of how they were pitched to people. And this one's, of course, a Liquid Digest. Let's see. Oh, yeah, this is really dopey. The Spirit of Scotland porcelain decanter of deluxe blended. Well, deluxe is an important word in book-shaped objects because deluxe is deluxe editions. Blended Scotch whiskey that is a real bestseller, like CELLAR. And that's not fiction, and that's what it says. That's what that first line says. It's like, oy, oy, oy. So tacky, but there's millions of them. Everybody must have had them or bought them or been given them as gifts. And again, you could have a whole library. You're not going to get one of these. You're going to get the whole set. So they're, and you can see the 2 sizes, the little ones on the bottom. I mean, that I think is 3 sizes. They came in 3 different sizes. I really love this website called the National Cigar Museum. There's this really grouchy guy who used to be in publishing, who will never publish again, and everything is on his website, and it's the history of cigars. And it is literally a cigar museum, and it's the most amazing website. And he has quite a few online exhibitions of book boxes. And sometimes they relate to Christmas, and sometimes they just relate to book-shaped cigar boxes. And this is and they've always made book-shaped cigar boxes. And it goes to show you here that the early ones really were bindings. I mean, they're gold-stamped publishers' bindings, cloth bindings, and with marbled paper edges. And the title is, Henry W. Longfellow. So these, again, were really good fakes, really great, and could be easily hidden on a bookshelf or fit really nicely into a library. And then from the sublime to the ridiculous, there's quite a few of these Russian plastic musical cigar dispensers that celebrate the Soviet space program from the mid-'60s. And the one that I have plays the song, "How Vast Is My Motherland." And I don't know if they all play that, but it would make sense if they did. It's sort of the national anthem. In the food and candy section, you see lots of lunchboxes starting in the 1860s, tin lunchboxes. Here's one with a patent for one that's very similar that I found. The only difference is in the patent, the drinking bottle is circular, cylindrical, whereas in the actual one I have sort of half a circle. I don't know if there's a word for half a circle, but so that when you open the box, it looks like a box as opposed to rounded, on the inside. So it's a secret compartment that slides from the top where the bottle comes out of the top, but you can also open the cover like it's a book, and that's where you can put your lunch. And candy boxes they start before the 1920s. I mean, you could get candy boxes in the 19th century. They're still making them today. It's like a lot of these genres of book objects have a continuous history for hundreds of years. Like, people have always made them. They're everywhere, but no one seems to have noticed them before. I don't know why, because all these objects are everywhere. When you leave this lecture, if you haven't already, you're going to be seeing these things everywhere, every day. I mean, there's book objects all over the place. So I love this is Whitman's chocolates. Whitman's chocolates started around, this one box came out around 1919, but it was made for several years. And it's very bookish. It's paper, but it's embossed. It's printed and embossed to look like a goatskin binding, and it's gold stamped. And it doesn't leave the bookishness. The bookishness doesn't stop on the outside of it. When you open it, it has a contents page, a title page. It's a book. And then there are many, many molds, like I showed you, the maple sugar mold, but this is a baking pan. There's lots of baking pans, commercial baking pans, and also home, baking pans for the home that are open books. And book cakes have always been very popular for graduations, for bat mitzvahs, for religious events, celebrations. And you can still buy them now. Wilton, you could buy them. They're very common. In the 19th century, late 19th and early 20th century, people used napkin rings, and they would have their own custom napkin rings, so they know that their cloth napkin, which they would reuse until laundry day, I guess, that's theirs. So the napkin ring would help them to know which their napkin was. And they made book-shaped napkin rings for children and women and masculine themes as well. And there are quite a few. There's about 4 of them, I think, in my exhibition, 4 or 5 in the exhibition. They're silver plate. And I've seen a lot also of these flatware boxes, like these are story spoons, where each spoon is illustrated with a Hans Christian Andersen story on the top. The top of the spoon is a different story with a character. I didn't take a detail of it, but that's what it is. And what the writing that you're seeing there that's the table of contents, stories. Chiffonette, I'm going to speed up, I guess, is one of my favorites. It's a recipe tin, patented in 1938, was popular through the 50s, and it came in a number of volumes, 3, 5, and 7 volume sets in different colors and different variations. The books don't come off the shelf. There's a rod that goes through the bottom, the foredge, and they kind of pivot off the shelf, but they won't come off. And they also were sold with cards, recipe cards. A lot of these, you've probably seen them, the ceramic Japanese sets. In the home furnishing section, this is another Met object, an incense box in the form of an Asian binding, Japanese binding. And I just put that in because, well, I think if you go to my show, you'll see I've tried to really represent books internationally. You'll see objects from many countries. This is a trade catalog from Paris with a Victrola where the spine slides open and for you to put the crank in. It's really a great one. I wish I had. I've never seen one. Commodes. Everybody's been sending me pictures of book commodes. And I did see one at the Antiquarian Book Fair last year, but it was like $9,000, and I thought, well, I could probably make one. But they're really funny. They were like for traveling, for your tent or something. I don't know. Tables. Grooming and fashion. This is a shaving kit from the 18th century. But here's a shaving kit from the 1950s. So it's another continuous theme. A really funny clothing brush called Not So Dusty by YB Untidy. It's very tiny. It's in the show. And a collar box that's also a real publisher's binding from the Reversible Collar Company, made in different color variations. And this is a made in Germany, a manicure set called The Culture of Manicuring. One of the really funny ones is I've been finding soap from the book Cadillac Hotel in Chicago. They made quite a few different variations of book soap, which I'm so happy that somebody saved because I have a few bars and different wrappers, bookish wrappers. And then funny things like this from England. This is a box for suspenders called The Perfect Hold Up by a further episode of the BR Aces, the braces, which is what they call suspenders in England, braces. And it's sort of like one of those penguin, mysteries. And I like this because it's bath salts and powder, but it's like a traveling library. Compacts, there's, any number of them. I have a few in the show. Judith Lieber, endless handbags of all different levels of elegance and expense and value. You can buy really cheap ones. You can buy, this is probably the most expensive one, the Judith Lieber bag. It sells for a few $1,000s at least. All crystal, and she made at least 15 of them, 15 different designs. I've tracked them on one of my blog posts if you're interested. I'm trying to track all of her designs because I know I'll never be able to buy them. And needlework is a big category too. This is another one designed after a real French, real gift book annual, the Gem, and one designed after a Masonic binding, the Sewing Society Secrets. Leather. And this is a tiny, tiny little needle case. Obviously a love token. And Denison, I could have a whole lecture about the Denison Company, which made all of its packaging in book form and did it so very purposefully because they felt that these objects these little objects that would have otherwise been thrown away, people collected them, they treasured them, and they just kept them for a really long time just because they looked like books, even though they were just paper. And in the books and writing section, of course, I had to put in a bookbinding repair kit, book repair kit, called The Care and Feeding a Book, which I found an ad for it, and it also came out in a deluxe edition in full pigskin. So it came out in binding variants, just like books did, like editions did. This is a book slate, a school slate bound as a book, double slate. And writing, this is a pen nib box and a pen wiper from the California missions, all made pen wipers with paintings of drawings of the mission buildings on them as souvenir items. Inkwell is a little traveling inkwell, designed after a Baedeker's Guide, which is a very popular travel guide. And that's really little. It's just a couple inches tall, and a child's writing box. These are both Denison book racks. And pocket lanterns were very popular in 1830s and 60s. Often they're made out of tin. This one is actually made out of bookbinding materials, leather and marbled paper. And they were these little portable candle lanterns, for reading. Although the ones that are patented said they were very useful for policemen and soldiers. So people would carry them on the streets. They had handles. The ones that were tin often had handles and a book light. So we're getting to the end. Banks are very common, so I put a couple pictures in of puzzle boxes. The encyclopedia, all the American encyclopedia companies made book banks. that looked exactly like their books, like the encyclopedias. And they were incentives for saving your money to pay for your next installment of the encyclopedia, because nobody could just pay outright for their encyclopedia, so they were encouraging the children to save so they could have the ideal encyclopedia, which was going to make them, educate them, and put them way ahead of all of their friends at school, because it was a really hard sell. The encyclopedias, these encyclopedias were sold door to door very aggressively, and then just a typical book safe. God, I'm probably going on too long, but we started a little late. So I'll go through these fast. These are games. This is a language game with a magnetic hand. So you would ask it a question and it would point to the answer in a publisher's binding. And of course, board games. This is in the show. You'll have to go see the show. If you like the subject, just go see the show. You'll see more things. Polly Pockets, love them. They're like medieval manuscripts. And puzzle sets. Props, I think I'm getting to the end because I wanted to show this little video from CBS, unless you've all seen it already, I don't know. This is Dr. Jax. There's just a book came out about him, and he had this famous book of mysteries. He was a tabletop magician, and he would, go to nightclubs like the Stork Club, and he would show up at the table with his box, and the box, I can't get it to go back though. The box had, first of all, it had letters from the crown heads of Europe, claiming how wonderful he was. And then it had, it's got its own mind. And then he would perform out of the box at the table, his tabletop magic tricks. This is something also from this Klosterman collection called the Salon de Magie. Yeah? Oh yeah, there is a place in the 30s called the what's it called? The Library of the Conjuring Arts Research Center. The Conjuring Arts Research Center. It's really wonderful. They have a website. You can reserve any 3 items if you want to go. I mean, they will let the public come there. But it's a membership library, and most of their resources you subscribe to by one level of membership or another. But it's interesting. I learned a lot about the props there. This is the Willman talking skull, which was an automaton. And I have a few of my Halloween props at the show. You'll see. This is one I don't have. I really like. It's a puppet. You can put your hand in the back of it, and it's the Necronomicon, which is of course the Lovelace. What's his name? Oh, I forget. The Lovecraft, the Evil Dead. Right? So you can get a lot of Evil Dead props, and this is a Kmart like haunted book prop, where the book comes out. It's a motion detector, so when you walk by, the book, it's at the show, you can see it. It comes out, it makes a lot of noise, it threatens your life, and it's really great. So I have, the video has lots of the gags. The CBS loved the gags, so this isn't in the show, so I love this one, so I put this one in. But here is a woman at the Adams factory making thousands of exploding books, which to fill a demand which seemingly went on forever. They say in here, and here, do you want to see it? It's 5 minutes. So you can, it's not going on. Oh, there it is.
If you're a lover of books, there's no place quite like the hushed hallways of New York's Grolier Club. It's America's oldest and largest society for the exceptionally well-read.
In this case, we have religion, commemoration, photography, and travel souvenirs.
But its latest exhibit is a page-turner of a decidedly different sort.
My hope was to knock everybody's socks off. I wanted to amaze and inspire.
Mindell Dubansky has spent the better part of 30 years rummaging through pawn shops and eBay and garage sales, all to find books that aren't filled with paper and ink. Instead, they're filled with surprises.
That's right.
That is great. From leaping wooden snakes to something a little more adult.
Book flasks were very popular during Prohibition, the hidden ones.
She even has a few books once owned by magicians.
That one is the Holy Bible Hot Book. So that when they're telling a story, they're doing their spiel, and then they open it and flames throw out at the top. And this is a hot book gone wrong. I mean, you can kind of see it's like...
This is all your collection?
This is part of my collection. Yeah, I have about probably maybe 600 or so. It's nuts. I know. It's crazy.
In fact, she has so many of these books that look like books but really aren't, she invented a name for them. Blooks.
It's an affectionate term that I have for them, and it just stuck.
So Blook is just a contraction of...
Book look. This case has food and candy, grooming and fashion, household appliances.
Her exhibit is the first of its kind, and it's drawing crowds of book enthusiasts, anxious to see her collected curiosities, often bound with nothing more than imagination.
And it is a sewing box.
Really?
Yes.
Take the 1960s Secret Sam camera book from Topper Toys. It included a periscope, a 16-exposure camera, and the ability to shoot rubber bullets. As a longtime preservation librarian at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Mindy began to think that books that looked like books should have a place in history too. So at its very core, this is a celebration of the book as a thing.
It's a book love show. For me personally, it's gratitude.
Gratitude for?
For books. I love them. It changed my life. What else can you, this little simple thing, it's sitting on the shelf, you pick it up, you start reading, the next thing you know, your entire life has been transformed and you're another person.
Her favorite fake books are the ones that do something or become something, like this one. Oh, wow. The oldest item in her collection.
It's a portable altar, a Catholic altar. It could have been a hidden altar in a place where it was safe to be a Catholic.
There's also a book alarm clock from the 1970s. Then there's this Crosley book radio from the 1950s. And then there's the book with eyes called The Informer. So what does this do?
It's a motion detector, a security alarm for your house.
Some are clearly novelty items, and those are Mindy's favorites.
This whole case is exploding books.
Yes, she said exploding. Brought to us by the same company that brought us the whoopee cushion. They went off with a bang to the unsuspecting reader. Or if they were really unlucky, some got an electric shock.
You scare the hell out of one of your friends, basically, and it's hysterical.
There are funny titles and funny authors, like this one, written by the illustrious Dostoevsky. They were called punchline books, and they all opened to reveal some pretty good one-liners. And what's this one? How to Save Your Hair?
How to Save Your Hair.
So how to save your hair is in plastic bag.
How to Save Your Hair. We absolutely guarantee if you use this method, you will never lose your hair.
So because they started out largely as kitsch or as a gag.
Or a novelty, maybe.
Is it hard to get people to take them seriously?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I had to have a show like this for people to take me seriously because they are kitsch.
But kitsch and yet still historically significant.
Well, isn't that what's so great about them? I think that's what people are responding to.
And why not? Books, even haunted ones, remind us that maybe in this age of digital novels and e-readers, that perhaps we're missing something.
Everyone wants to kill books. They're dead. We're going to the book funeral. It's like, what? No. Books are so meaningful to so many people, and I feel like this is the time to celebrate them in a positive way. The wood in this box...
And celebrate them she has. More proof that, yes, books, even fake ones, still matter.
The world's a tough place, and this is a little spot of joy. It's great. That's that one. So... Thank you. So next, we just wanted to point out to you that I have a copy of the book here. I only brought one if anybody wants one, but you can get them off my website if you're interested. And they're self-published. And they'll have them at the club until the end of the show, March 12th. And after that, you'll have to get them from me unless I think of something else. And if you want to keep up with all the blog posts or keep up with the subject, then you should just... or get a book later, or whatever you want, write in, send pictures of your books. You can look at the blog, or email me. Yes, that's accurate. So those are the two ways of finding me. And also, so we have Francis here. Francis is someone volunteered by his mother, originally to me when I was looking for someone to perform, because I think these things need to be seen in action. So Francis has he did this. He demonstrated one of the books at one of my events, and he's agreed to do that for us tonight. He's going to be showing you the miniature mysteries by Vernon Cook, and telling you about it at the table. So you should come up and watch him.
First, remain seated. We'll do a quick kind of warm-up thing. So as Mindy said, my name is Francis. Now, I'd like all of you to extend your hands like this. Okay. And I want you to turn them like this, and I want you to cross them like this. Okay? Okay, good, good. Now, I want you to go from this to this. Come on. We'll try again. Extend your hands. All right. Like this, you cross them, okay? Like that. All right, good. Now, go from... It's very simple. All right, anyway. So as Mindy said, we have this book called Miniature Mysteries, and it's not actually a book. It's by Vernon Cook, and he was a magician in the 1940s, I believe, and he was known as the Montana Mountebank. Where's the Mountebank? Mountebank. And he had a collection of 700 books, and he didn't just collect them for the sake of collecting. He actually thought it was important to read the books you had. So this is probably one such book that he had commissioned, and see, when you open it, you see it's a kind of children's set that you might have seen. Now they make them in plastic. So now, if you all would, please come up to the table. So usually the magician would come up, he would open the box and not let anyone see what's within it. Hence, this is kind of very convenient for a magician because you can conceal. But in this case, since I'm not going to be doing as much magic as talking about it, I'll show you what's inside. Now, first of all, I didn't know most of the tricks that were in here. So I went to a magic shop that I used to hang out at, Tannins, and I have a friend named Magic there, and he knows all about these kind of things, and so he showed me what some of the tricks do. A lot of them he didn't know, some of them he did know. So this is one of them. Let me see. It's a matchbook, and of course it's an ordinary matchbook, and I'll take out 3 of the matches. And I'm going to make a little triangle. And I'm going to call this the Bermuda Triangle. And you know what happens in the Bermuda Triangle? Things get lost, things disappear. Now, does anyone have some kind of very expensive ring? Or like a diamond? Something very valuable? Oh, you do? Okay. I wasn't expecting any response to it. I mean, what a great spectacle. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, well, watch carefully. Here it is. Right here. I want to actually put it in the Bermuda Triangle. I would want to do the table. Then, I'll use something that's a bit more worthless. I'll use a penny. I'm going to put it right within the triangle. Now I'm going to use the box of matches. I'm going to put them on top. So I need some wind. See, the Bermuda Triangle is on the sea, and this is like a sea, it's blue. So now we need a north wind, south wind, west wind, and an eastern wind. So who'd like to be the eastern wind here? You'll be the eastern wind. You'll be the northern wind. Is that okay? You'll be the western wind, and I'll be the southern wind. So now I want you all to blow out the box of matches, okay? And I'll join you. Okay, very good, thank you. Now, if it worked correctly, the penny should be gone, but it's inside the box. Now, okay, does anyone want these matches? So, then for these are mostly props See, these stick together. You don't know why, you don't have to know why, but they do. And you can kind of, you can't really tell what all of these are because they're kind of mysterious. You can have, you can kind of guess because a lot of these tricks aren't made anymore or aren't used anymore. But now these kind of things are made in plastic. So a lot of it is kind of, I guess you could say, arbitrary and very interesting to a magician because, for instance, these balls I know would be used for a routine called cups and balls. You've probably seen Penn and Teller do them, he does the cups. That's what these would be used for. They don't come with the cups though. And then also there's this, and this is called a thumb tip. And now usually a magician wouldn't reveal one of these because it's a secret. It would go on my thumb like this and you would never know that it's there. Now, what's interesting about this is that it's not made out of plastic or rubber as they are today. It's made out of tin. So, very interesting. I've never seen one before. And it would be like this. Sometimes you see magicians make silks disappear. They're usually using this. And I can tell you that because even if you know, you still won't usually catch one doing this. But since it's kind of a, this is a book about books, and this is kind of then a trick about tricks. So this is used to make things disappear, but then I'll make the thing that's used to make things disappear. It's right here. Well, one more trick. Okay. Now again, I want you to extend your hands. I want you to cross one like this, and then cross the other like this. And then I want you to go one back like this. And then I want you to go over like that. Okay, and now I want you to go like this. They did it. So a few of you did. We'll try again. Start like this, okay? So you have one hand like that, you have the other hand like that, like this. Okay? Now you go over. You should be able to do it. See? And then one more. Thank you. Alright, feel free to look at them.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions for Francis or Mindy, please ask. And that is a copy of Mindy's book, so please feel free to look through.
Ian Burke is someone, a friend of ours, who collects only stone books, 19th century carved stone books, and he has hundreds and hundreds of them, all antique, beautiful objects, where people would carve stone books, Bibles, blood tokens mostly, and memorial books. Those really are, they are sometimes just souvenirs of the place. Yeah, like in Italy, there's not marble books, and yeah.
were snuff boxes, and they're small, but they're incredible. My name is something like Elbow. The earliest one we have is 1714. The next one is 1750. Very much hope to read. The press picture was unbelievable. And it was scholars and librarians and bibliophiles and professors who made their snuff boxes in the shape of books.
Students have made it with professors very I did have something. And then have, we have this, as two intertwined hearts. Not just the librarian side, but the library side, but the design side too. It's
Package design.
yeah, package.
What's your favorite?
Well, I think it's also like that first one that I made me touch, which is the cold one. But I like them all for different reasons.
That's how we feel.
Sure, I know, it's, we
They're
give
like
you a
our,
kid, but
they're like
I
our
mean, I
children.
love-
we won't tell them.
I mean, there's some that you know are really special and you couldn't find another one. And most of them, Bruce's collection is 3D, like every single one they have. Like there's no, it's not an addition. Where I'm like much more, my collection is much more like average, a lot more of regular stuff that people have. You know, so there's some things that are multiples, and then some things that are very unique or it's rare. So, but if you get, you know, rare things are great. But I just love like I mean, as a group, I like Victoria. They're so funny to me, and I can't look at them without picturing these dopey boys, you know, doing their thing, you know. Just like because when my head goes when I look at these things, this isn't really just looking at the object. I immediately like just trying to picture the factory which they were made, or somebody actually making them, or who had them and how they were using them.
Testing them to
Yeah.
get the work.
Yeah, so I kind of just go into the scenario in my head, and that to me I enjoy more than just looking at the object. There's the whole picturing like how they talk about books. That's what I'm trying to get to. Is like, what's that connection? We have